Hey guys, it's me, Sealy, and I'm back with another YouTube video that I'm really excited to show you guys because I've been loving this deck this season. We all know Tactical Decision is a pretty strong leader right now for Nilfgaard. It's definitely the leader to play. And this is a fun spin on something that was initially mid-range NG, and it turned into this more Assimilate heavy version. So guess what? Assimilate is back. Don't look at the deck name. I mean, that's a choice, but hey, it's Assimilate and mid-range kind of merged into one big ball of Assimilate NG. So here we go. Let's look at the cards. We'll talk about the game strategy, and I will see you right here in a bit when we talk about the cards and the strategy. All right, let's get right down to business. We can start with the very staple of Assimilate, that is Trace TK, Trace Telekinesis. She's a really great card to play when you have a lot of Assimilates on the board. So try to save her for round 3 if you can't, and you feel like you really have to win the round against something that you're playing. You can commit her, but usually she's one of those finishing plays to just boom, go for all the points. Trace Telekinesis into an experimental remedy, into a premium Duchess's Informant, for example, is a really great play when you have a lot of Assimilate engines, of course. And then we have the mighty Sunset Wanderers. Really great card to play in any non-devotion deck, and this deck loves running it because of it fitting so well with our leader here, and the synergy is pretty good. Play your cards from the left of Sunset Wanderers if you can. Be mindful of when you want to use your leader as well. You could potentially get a really big Sunset Wanderers when you use it with your leader. Then let's look at Avaloch, just a great card to play for points. Also triggers Assimilates. Ramon, really awesome card here. We have the double Alba Armored Cavalry to make sure we can lock any deck that runs a lot of engines. Let's say Koshi, for example, double Ramon lock is a really good option to have in those scenarios. So that's why we run Ramon. He can also copy a Slave Hunter, for example, or a Nausicaa Sergeant. Great targets for him, just a solid 10 Persian gold to have in here. Brothans, awesome card as well, triggers Assimilate and creates a premium copy. Let's talk a little bit about why this card, Duchess's Informant, is not premium here in the deck. It is non-premium because both Brothans and Artorias have the option to create a Duchess's Informant. Now, if they create a copy of Duchess's Informant, that one will proc Assimilate later on. So let's say we play Experimental Remedy in round 3, and we've played a Duchess Informant from hand, as well as we have created one from either Artorias or Brothans, and it lies in the graveyard. We want to make sure that we activate and use the premium copy. So that's why this one card is non-premium for a reason, so that I can recognize in the graveyard which one was created and which one is the standard copy, and I always want to go for getting the premium copy out of there to trigger more of the Assimilate. Then we're moving on to Ivor Evil Eye, a great card to have included in Nilfgaard in this meta, since a lot of Sunset Wanderers out there, Ivor Evil Eye tends to get a lot of value. Just be mindful of that adrenaline there that he has. Ku, great to copy either Roderick if you're missing some of your golds. You can copy him. If you want to copy a Duchess to copy your opponent's bronzes, it's a great target. You can use your Slave Hunter sometimes to set up great Ku targets. So Ku also, of course, triggers the Assimilate, which is why it's included. Menno, on the other hand, can tutor out our Ku. He can also tutor out a Diplomacy or Experimental Remedy. So it's a good card to have, and it also thins. Artorias Vigo works a little bit similarly to Brothans, for example. He's an Assimilate engine himself, and he can create any of our bronzes. Of course, sometimes he can low roll a little bit, but a lot of our targets are kind of nice for him to create. So usually you're aiming to create a Duchess, maybe a lock situational if you really need it. So let's hope that Artorias' RNG will be on your side. And fun, of course, you can use to have in your hand, and then when you use your leader, you put him on top. He will come right back on the board for you as a 5 power unit. Now 7 provisions, he's been buffed, so he's really great to have in any tactical decision deck right now. Glynis, of course, Assimilate 2, pretty straightforward. She's not that easy to kill. Of course, she can get locked. Maybe combine it with your leader so that you play Glynis and leader in the same turn if you want to make sure she gets at least 2 of those Assimilate procs. Roderick here to find all of our goals, a coup target, and anything we're missing, we're going to find with Roderick. Experimental Remedy, usually mulligan target in round 1. We can use it later in round 3 to hopefully resurrect one of the premium Duchess's informants that we might have played before that, or any other useful bronze from the opponent's graveyard that we can use ourselves. Alba Armored Cavalry, great lock tech here. Slave Hunter, Assimilate Engine, useful potential Ramon target. A Duchess's informant, a very useful triggers Assimilate. Same with Diplomacies. Nausicaa Sergeant, pretty straightforward as well, just a good soldier engine that will proc every time you use a deploy ability. And Mage Assassin, of course, a great target to have with our leader, so we keep them in hand so that we can then use them with the leader to get a great amount of points on the board. Emissary, usually a mulligan target in this deck, but it can prove useful if you need to protect your engines. Now, we are going with the tactical advantage stratagem. If you feel like you get more out of Crystal Skull and veiling one of your engines, definitely that is also playable. I personally like this, just going for the 5 boost and boosting one engine like a Nausicaa Sergeant or a Slave Hunter. Magic Lamp if you don't want to play that tall, but we are a Assimilate, so we will be playing pretty tall anyways, so I don't personally mind this tactical advantage going tall either. Alright, and in terms of the gameplay and strategy that you want to go for with this deck, it's usually pretty straightforward. You can play your engines, couple of Assimilates round 1. You don't have to play super committal unless you really need to win round 1, which can be a viable strategy against something like Syndicate Line Pockets, where you know that they have a Tunnel Drill and Cleaver that will pretty easily kill a lot of your Assimilate engines, and in those scenarios it's good to win round 1 just to get that round control and that you can bleed out the Tunnel Drill and Cleaver hopefully in round 2. So in those situations you have to make the assessment, can I win this in a long round? Because Assimilate tends to do really well in a long round as well. There's nothing to worry about. This deck definitely has points, but be mindful. Do you have enough control for your opponent's engines? And do you think that your opponents can deal with your Assimilate engines? So definitely something worth considering. If you think there's a siege, you might also want to have round control, things like that, so just keep it in mind. Other than that, if you think your deck can beat your opponent's deck in a long round, you don't have to play too committal round 1, and just hope for a round 3. You can defend the bleed quite nicely. You can also bleed quite nicely if you opt to do so, because with your leader, and hopefully your leader targets there, you can put a lot of points on the board quite fast, and it might put your opponents in difficult situations when they have to catch up to those points in round 2 where they're getting bled. So definitely a flexible deck, which I'm a big fan of. Let's jump into some games. I'll show you this deck in action and talk a little bit more about the strategy as well as the cards and what decision making I've decided to go for when playing this deck. Alright, we are going to jump into game number 1 that I have played and recorded. Now I'm talking over what plays and what decision making I decided to go for. So we'll look at that together. We queued into Lined Pockets here, and this is one of the matchups I talked about a little bit. It's quite tough for us because the Tunnel Drill and Cleaver can quite easily take care of our Assimilate engines, so we have to be mindful of that. I'm mulliganing Experimental Remedy. It's not a great card to have round 1. And then I'm mulliganing this emissary because it's probably one of the weaker 4 provision cards in the deck, and we find more use of the engines and the bronze specials that we have. Now keep in mind with this deck, however, a lot of the time you prefer mulliganing the specials instead of the bronze engines, so keep the bronze engines and play them round 1 if you can. They are a little bit awkward if you draw into a lot of them when you use your leader, and you have to play them late. You usually want to play them early in a round, so if you find them round 1, that's nice, and you can put them down on the board. That's why we're going to start with one of them. Either Nausicaa or Slave Hunter is fine to go with. I have decided for the Slave Hunter here as an opening play, so I'm going to go ahead and play that, and Nausicaa is something I probably want to play next. But yeah, Tunnel Drill and Cleaver, like I mentioned, those cards exist and are a threat to our engines, so I'm immediately considering how do I win this round on even. This particular matchup is one that you definitely want to commit in round 1 and win it so that you can bleed out those threats that I just mentioned. Before we can use leader though, we have to play 7 cards, and like I said, we're just gonna set up some engines here. I'm thinking about using this Slave Hunter ping, but then I decided, you know what, I don't need to use it just yet. Maybe I can set up a coup, something like that later, so I hold on to it. And my opponent has committed justice. That's usually something Line Pockets can do on blue coin if they are scared of losing the round on even. Now ship comes out and our opponent is at max coins. Now we have to make a pretty big play here if we want to go for it, which is exactly what I'm intending on doing, since I do have 2 leader targets in my hand here with the slave, with the fawn and the mage assassin. That means I can definitely play my leader and get good value of it round 1. My Avalok is also coming out. I'm choosing the Frost here because there are 2 6s on the board. The shield is always a little bit awkward. I could have gone for a rain maybe there as well if I wanted to. But here comes the big leader. Now I have to put 3 cards on top. Of course, that will be my targets. Mage Assassin and a Fawn. Now I have to choose a 3rd card to put on top. I'm a little bit conflicted whether I should go for a bronze that I can later mulligan, or if I should go for a gold here. I think in the end here I decide to go for Triss, because I say, you know what, I can win this round without spending my Triss, and I will save her for later, and I know I will draw into it because she's at the top of my deck. Of course, when you're playing against Nilfgaard, especially Mill, you have to be a little bit concerned about that leader and what card you place on top. But here it's completely safe to put Triss on top because we know we'll draw into her later. Okay, so my opponent now is using a dip in the Pontar, putting our poor Slave Hunter here at risk of dying, and that means I really want to proc the Assimilate to make sure it doesn't die. So let's see what I ended up going with here. I believe it was a Diplomacy or a Informant. Both of those plays seem like good ones to go with. Yeah, it's the Informant because what I'm thinking here is I can copy the Blacksmith and use those extra boosts there to protect my Slave Hunter. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And I decided on the placement to put it between the Crown Splitters to hopefully make the drill a little bit worse. Maybe I end up playing another Spy to block the other Crown Splitter pocket that my opponent needs. And now I can quite nicely use these pings to protect my Slave Hunter, my Assimilate engine, and I finally decide to use that ping as well. Unfortunately, our Frost hit the shield there, not getting value. But that is something that was going to happen no matter what effect we would have chosen. My opponent here seems to go for all of these bleeds. Let's see what comes out next. We are ahead in points by quite a bit, so I think we are in a pretty good position here. Alright, here comes Furco, another Crown Splitter to tutor out a special, and it seems to be a Fistic, landing on the Nausicaa Sergeant here. Okay, Wanderer has nicely passed this Imperial Diplomacy here, so I think that's something I'm gonna go for. Alright, I see the Eavesdrop there. That's a pretty good choice since we do have a spender on the board with the Blacksmith. We find the Tris that we put on top, and now we have to put something at the bottom. It's going to be the Alba Armored Cavalry because we don't want to put any of these golds on the bottom of the deck. And I'm using all of these coins here because there's no point for me in getting a coin carryover. It's a little bit more important to just win the round. So I decide, hey, I'm gonna use them. And we are ahead in points by quite a bit. Our opponent agrees and passes here, giving us the round. So we do spend Avaloch and Leader, but we do win on even, which is definitely a good spot to be in, especially in this matchup. What we're doing here is we're really exploiting Line Pocket's only weakness, which is being on blue coin and getting pushed. I take the mulligan there on the Emissary. The Emissary is, again, not the strongest 4 provision card here. And I'm thinking, should I take another mulligan? I do put the Nausicaa Sergeant back. Potentially, I find it later to use with something like Ramon. And I find an experimental remedy. Now it's all about going in for that push. We want to see Cleaver, we want to see Tunnel Drill. Honestly, if we just see Cleaver, we're going to be happy because that means since our opponent played Justice round 1, it's going to be really hard for them to enable the Crown Splitter pocket. So just try to see that Cleaver, that's what I'm doing here. And once I see it, I'm happy. Let's see what my opponent decides to play. Out comes the Professor. I have to admit, I was not expecting Professor. I haven't seen that for a while in Line Pockets deck, so I was a little bit surprised. And now I think we only have a kind of one play to go for here, which is the Proactive Brothans into an Emissary. I don't really see anything else to do here. I'm trying to think about it here, but I think it is the Brothans. Yep, I have to play it here. Brothans, boosting Brothans. Unfortunately, we give him a pretty big poison target, but no other play for me to make here, I believe. And now our opponent's playing a special, going up to 9 coins, getting the boat out. I think it's quite natural I play the Artorias here. I'm hitting an Assimilate engine with the Slave Hunter. That's what I'm going to choose since it has the extra 2 damage if it survives. And this way I proc my Assimilate engines and have as many of those on the board as possible. I just have to wait to see how my opponent is going to react to this play. Out comes the mighty Witchfinder. It seems like my opponent has cut a Jacques and plays a Professor and a Witchfinder instead. A bit of a lag there in the recording, unfortunately, but we can still see what's going on here. I hope. I'm going for the experimental remedy here. There isn't much in the graveyard, nothing to copy for the Duchess Informant, so we're just gonna go for the Bloody Good Friends for some value. And here we use the Slave Hunter to ping the Professor down, use 1 bleed from the Bloody Good Friends, and this way we enable a coup for ourselves if that's something that we want to play this round. Sea Jackal comes out, and so does the Sunset Wanderers, meaning we have a really nice Evar, just in perfect time for this Adrenaline. We get a nice point swing here, thanks to Evar, our friend. Quite optimal use of him on a Sunset Wanderers. And now we're ahead in points again. We still haven't seen Cleaver. I think my opponent's definitely trying to hold on to it. But the point gap is getting quite big. And here is the Cleaver. Opponent realizing the point gap is a little bit too big. I was hovering over that Mage Assassin because I was unhappy to see it, and I asked him, what were you doing in round 1? Why weren't you in my hand? Because he makes it a little bit awkward. You don't really want to play that from hand, unfortunately. Alright, and the cleaver comes out, spends so that my opponent is able to get ahead. What I'm gonna do here is coup the professor. Use a ping on the Bloody Good Friends first on the cleaver. And yeah, then we go for the coup to make sure that we can kill this cleaver. I proc all of my Assimilate engines, and it's a nice play to go for here. One mighty coin we gain from that kill, and we definitely spend it. We spend it here on Sunset Wonders. Now my opponent does have bounty on the Brothans, but we can see that my opponent does not have too many coins. So unless you can get coins here, your tunnel drill is going to be a little bit awkward. So down comes the Kurt, also switching the bounty target to the professor. This is definitely signaling to me that my opponent has the drill in hand. And I honestly am very tempted to play this Triss and the second card, but since the second card is a mage assassin, I'm definitely going to pass. Yeah, I don't want to play it. If it would be another card, I could consider going for the Triss and try to play for 2-0 here. But yeah, we let opponent have this drill. They do have to spend 4 coins in order to get 6, and then 3 coins is carryover, of course. But my opponent does go down a card here, which is quite nice for us. We still have a couple of golds left in deck that we're going to try to fish out for round 3. Alright, and there we find Roderick. We're happy about that. It's going to be a Ramon or a Minnow. So I'm pretty happy about that. I go for another mulligan on the Imperial Diplomacy. I find this Slave Hunter here, which is a pretty nice Ramon target for me to go for. Here comes another Bronze Syndicate special. The Ramon is a better target on this Slave Hunter because with this round length, I'm doubting that my opponent actually has more than 1 spender. So I don't think I will be needing the double lock as much as I might benefit from having double Slave Hunter. So that's why I'm gonna play this Slave Hunter here from the Ramon. My opponent's banking into something. Let's see what comes out. It is a Freak Show. So a spender, which is nice for my opponent to see as they are on a lot of coins. Now my opponent is spending everything they have, and this to me is signaling definitely there is no other spender than the Freak Show here, so we can just go ahead and lock it, and my opponent shouldn't have access to another spender. Otherwise the coin spending was a bit weird there. Here comes a Fistic, and here comes my Slave Hunter. Playing that before proccing any Assimilate there. They're just gonna go for that. We have the coup into Menno, we have the Triss into whatever we find. Usually against Syndicate, your Triss pool is not that great. As we can see, our Triss here is pulling only Syndicate cards. That's sometimes what happens, but we're in no stress here since yeah, we did pretty good at bleeding out the important resources of this matchup. So I think that's a really good demonstration of that this deck can be good against one of the strongest decks this meta. This particular matchup though, even though this deck is quite flexible, you can choose to bleed, you can choose to pass early, you are good in a long round. In this particular matchup, definitely consider bleeding your opponent. Consider using your leader if you find those leader targets and win on even. It can pay off like it did in this game. Let's move on to the next one. Alright, we are queuing into game number 2. Let's see what we can find here. Okay, we have queued into Northern Realms Inspired Zeal. Now, this usually means Commandos. We're not sure what version yet, but yeah, definitely with that curse scroll, we can probably tell it's going to be some kind of a Commando version. So let's mulligan our cards. We want the Imperial Diplomacy to go here, just because we'd rather have engines round 1 than special cards. Then the Emissary, of course, also went. It's a 4 provision card, not the best one, so I decided to mulligan it. This list struggles in terms of defenders, it doesn't really have a purify. So we're just going to have to see how this round will work out. If there is a full test and a defender, we might be in a little bit of trouble. If there's not, we can probably contest the round. But let's just open with a good old Nausicaa Sergeant. Any engine here is fine. We set those up before we play anything else. Is my opponent going to play defender? They're going to play full test here without a defender. It is a bit ballsy, but there we go. It is a full test and no defender. So there aren't that many ways for us to actually block the full test, but we do have the Roderick here and a lot of golds in deck. We're not really sure what we're pulling with him, but it could be worth playing it just to block the create on those commandos for opponent, because otherwise we might be in a little bit of trouble if they can't continuously keep creating more and more commandos. So there we go, and we pull in Artorias, maybe hoping that we find a lock, which we don't. So we're just gonna take this Duchess's Informant. It's a good create card. Also place it next to the spy there, just in case our Roderick gets removed somehow. And we copy the commandos. Now ideally you have a little bit more spies in your hand than I do, or something like coup, so that you can copy and make commandos of your own. That's a pretty cool strategy. Like copying this blue stripe scout here would be really nice. Of course, that won't be possible for us. Now, we do want to put some points on the board if we intend on staying in the game. And Ramon does not seem like a bad idea here. Get a little bit more Assimilate engines on the board. So we're just gonna go ahead and play that Ramon into a lovely Slave Hunter. I don't know if I should be calling a Slave Hunter lovely, but yeah, there it is. We're at least happy about it on our side of the board. Natalis here, playing into Amphibious Assault, probably for another commando here, or blue stripe scout to create more commandos. Yep. Now, ideally, we still win this round somehow. Otherwise, things can end a little bit badly. I think we have to go for our Avaloch here. It's a little bit too slow to play the other Slave Hunter here. So we're just gonna go with Avaloch, Proxim, Assimilate, and Frost seems like a good choice here. So we end up going for that one. And now we're still in the race of winning this round. Okay, our opponent takes the pass here. It's kind of a perfect Ivar Evil Eye for us to take this round with. He plays for a lot of points, and in this matchup, since there is no Wanderers, he's not going to play for a lot more. So it's a good card to play here. And we are going to go into round 2. Now, since our opponent didn't contest that round too much, it makes me think there's definitely something that we might want to bleed out. Either it's a siege or it could be a drog, something like that. But it's a little bit sketchy. Usually commando players really want to win the round if they are all in on the commando strategy. So I'm starting to feel like there's something we might need to bleed out here. For now, we open with our Slave Driver. Out comes the Ardinian Mauler, a card that I haven't seen for a really long time personally. We have all of our leader charges in hand. So this is a great thing that our deck can do, is just put a lot of points on the board really, really fast. Exactly what we're doing right here. Now, this puts our opponents in potentially a pretty tricky position because you do have to get ahead in points. Now we have to play another card here as well. If we wanted to go for the ultimate tempo, we could have chosen to go for a Brothens before playing the leader. But right now, I think I'm just gonna go here for the Menno into Diplomacy, since really there isn't anything too great in the graveyard there. So we're just gonna go here for a 6-point Temple Guard along with the Assimilate proc. And we have a good chunky 30 points on our side of the board. So let's see how our opponent answers it. Here comes a Seltkirk, probably intending on removing my engine here. Yep, there it goes. And this is a pretty nice pass for us if we want to take it. We could still consider putting a little bit more tempo on the board if we really wanted to, but considering the point gap here, it's going to be really awkward for my opponent to actually catch up on it. So I'm definitely leaning toward a pass here. It's going to be committal. You have to do this in this point gap, which means our opponent probably would go down a card here to actually be able to make it. There's my pass, and now my opponent has to really consider what to do here. We know they have an assault because they used it round 1, but assault isn't really gonna cut it. It's definitely gonna be a matter of playing 2 cards from our opponent, and potentially we're gonna see some good cards here. So let's see what my opponent is going to end up with. They're definitely gonna need to think about this one for a bit. Okay, out comes Roche Merciless. And after that, I wonder what else we're gonna see. Our Wanderer quite nicely is ticking here. There definitely needs to be another play coming down from opponent. Okay, there is Correct Marine, not quite doing it. We need to play a leader charge here. And out comes Hubert, which is really good for us, not that good for opponents, but yeah, we're happy to see it. Definitely keep in mind these types of plays where you just tempo ahead with your leader and make it a little bit awkward for your opponent. Ideally in round 2 when you're bleeding is a really good time to do it. Let's see what we find here and what we intend on mulliganing. Alright, we can see we have 1 engine in our deck still. So I think the mulligan here should be on Duchess's Informant, because we would like to try and see if we can find that engine. And since Wanderer is going to draw us another card, we would rather it draws us one of these Assimilate proc cards. We do find the Slave Hunter, the engine that we were looking for, so no need to take another mulligan. It doesn't get much better than this. Out comes Pavetta. My opponent puts all the commandos back into their deck, and we open once again with a nice solid engine here. We have Nausicaa as well as Glynis, something that we might want to put on the board to then be able to trigger their Assimilate pings or deploy procs, all of that fun stuff. Here comes the Radovid's Royal Guard on that ranged rope. Getting formation here, seems like a good time to use the Slave Hunter ping there. It's just getting good value. Now we could either play the Nausicaa or the Glynis. I decided to go a bit greedy and play the Glynis, since it's after the Sunset Wanderer has just passed it on its little evening stroll. So here comes the Glynis before I want to play the Nausicaa. And interestingly enough, here comes the Amphibious Assault into Commando. Of course, we can see we have double lock in hand now, and my opponent actually has no way of putting Zeal on this because they used all of their leader charges there in round 2. So now we can actually use a lock for some really great value if we can actually manage to stop this Blue Stripes Commando from inviting all his friends to the party. And out comes our very big Wanderer, 15 points. Not a bad sight to see for us. All right, and here's a Drog. So yeah, this was the card that we might have tried to bleed out. We didn't get it, but it's not going to play for too much here this round, since we were able to still get a good advantage of our opponents there in round 2. Now we play our Nausicaa. We miss out on a little bit of value because we played the lock first, but the lock was a little bit too good not to take it, so we decided to do it in that order. This Baron is really, really nice for opponent here, getting that Sunset Wanderer to 1 power unit and then using a Revenant to duplicate another or spawn another Revenant. Let's go for Alba Armored Cavalry here. I don't think we're gonna get any better lock targets here, so might as well lock a Revenant. Now that we know it's not any siege engines, it's none of that, so we already saw the Stealth Kirk. We can just play the lock here. Alright, Vincent Mace, another card I haven't seen in a long time, but it's cool to see he's back. Of course, pulling for some decent value here. My opponent being able to remove an engine and spawn another Revenant. Now, since the Revenants are on board, I'm trying to avoid playing any of those 1-power spies because that's kind of a free fuel for the Revenants. So instead, we're going for diplomacy here. Actually, didn't know that Carabalista was ranged lock. I could have played Glynis and Nausicaa ranged. So that's a missed opportunity. Then I would have gotten the armor on the Carabalista because of the crew ability. But yeah, Carabalista is nice because now I have damage ping to potentially kill a spy that is created by Brothans or Triss. Here comes the Voimir, shielding up some of these Revenants. Now I can play the Brothans, copy a Revenant. We're going for the copy because it's triggering all of our Assimilate and the Nausicaa Sergeant there. Seems like a pretty good call, and we can use the remaining damage on the Carabalista to get rid of our Duchess so that our opponent doesn't benefit from it with their own Revenants. Alright, there is the damage from the Carabalista. Now our opponent has one more card. Let's see what it is. Alright, it is a Siege Ladder moving this Vincent and playing around coup really nicely there. We do have the Revenant ping here if we wanted to set up a coup, however. We can just Triss for an informant there with the experimental remedy. Doesn't seem too bad. I'm just checking that I have the premium copies there all set aside for the graveyard, and also great Revenant food for the Revenant that I just copied. Oh, I guess we're going to copy this Siege Ladder, of course. Nice 6-point play, triggering Assimilate, and the game is sealed here. Opponent knows it, so they decided they don't want to see this coup played out either. Yeah, that's another fun game with this deck where we kind of demonstrated the whole strategy of bleeding round 2 and making it pretty awkward for your opponent to respond to that. Thank you so much everyone for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please like this video and subscribe if you want to see more. It helps me a lot and supports me. So thanks for all of that, and I will see you guys for the next one. Bye!